Morning, Trainiac. Just about to go and do a short little 20-minute brick run after a Team Trainiac group Zwift ride. And I am using the Atreyu shoes that I just reviewed. Now these are the old ones, but what I have right here is a pair of brand new ones. And what a lot of running shoe companies and people who use shoes a lot and get familiar with the lifespan of shoes talk about is the lifespan of running shoes. Are they a 100-mile shoe? Are they a 300-mile shoe? Are they a 200-mile shoe? At what point does the performance break down, and what does that breakdown mean? Does it mean that they just don't feel good, or does it mean that they actually don't perform as well? So what we're gonna do is, after this run, we're gonna come back in here, we're gonna put on a VO2 mask to see how hard I'm working, and we're gonna try the old shoes versus the new shoes, and we're gonna see if there are any metrics that we can figure out that give us incentive to say, you know what? We should spend more money and keep updating our shoes. Or keep using your old shoes, save some money. We'll see. Science. So, all right, Trainiacs, what we're talking about is flat shoes. And there are two ways that you can think about this. First is when your shoes get old. I usually find this to be around 100 miles that they start losing their pop, and you might not notice it, but when you end up testing a lot of shoes, going back and forth between a bunch, you end up noticing it pretty significantly. And the second way is when you run on shoes too frequently. So the foam in shoes actually needs about 24 to 48 hours to recover to actually get its springiness and its cushion back. Something that I know for sure is that your performance is going to decline if you run on shoes that are too old. We know that for sure. That's why people get new shoes. And we also know that when shoes get old, you can get injuries. That's actually the first sign that you need to replace your shoes, is if your feet are sore, if your ankles are sore, if your knees are sore. It's a good indication that you need to replace your shoes. So what we're gonna test when we get back is a pair of Atreyu shoes with about 100 kilometers, around 60 miles, where I feel they're starting to lose their sharpness, versus a brand new pair of Atreyu shoes that I have just 16 kilometers, around 11 miles in them. We're gonna see if there's any performance or any sort of difference in cadence and how my body functions. And we're gonna try to pull as much data as we can and see when you start to see some performance declines. Is it fairly soon? Just rained, it's kind of sloppy out. Okay, test done. I've got to look at the data, but on first glance, performance-wise, doesn't really look that different. Let's dive into it in a second. All right, Trainiacs, what did we do there? Well, we did a test using the old Atreyu shoes that I've got about 100 kilometers on, roughly somewhere around 60 miles. Then we did a test with the new Atreyu shoes that I only had about 16 kilometers on, somewhere around 10 miles up until this point. How we tested it was with the VO2 Master mask. This has been tested in a lab to be accurate. And we used the Stride running power meter, which has actually been tested to be more accurate for measuring distance than actually things like a Garmin watch or GPS on your bike computer or a smartphone, anything like that. So we have tools to understand what is actually going on. How we did the test was I did a 15-minute warm-up run on the treadmill to get my heart rate up. Then I did 7.5 minutes in the old shoes with the Stride running power meter and the VO2 mask, and then 7.5 minutes with the new running shoes with same thing, VO2 master mask and the Stride running power meter. And then I took the data from the last 5 minutes of that 7.5 minutes to see, once my heart rate got up, what actually ended up happening. And the results we've got over here, and they shocked the hell out of me. What we've got here are the 3 measurements that I really wanted to look at. In the first column here, we've got the old shoe results. In the second column, we've got the new shoes. Then we've got VO2, and that's the amount of oxygen it's taking me to go at the same pace, roughly the same pace. The treadmill was set at the very same pace. I just kept it running the entire way through. Then the pace that was picked up by the Stride running power meter, which we know is very accurate, and cadence, which again is picked up by the Stride running power meter, which we know is very accurate. Just really quickly, we see a VO2 of 43 for the old shoes, 46 for the new shoes. That's gonna really alarm you right on first glance, and we'll get back to that. Pace, basically the same, 449 for the old shoes, 450 from the new shoes. There is a little bit of a difference because what we've actually seen when we test different pairs of shoes is the actual pace that is perceived by the Stride running power meter, even when the treadmill is set to the same pace, can be different because just the running mechanics are different. Cadence was bang on exactly the same. Now let's come back to the amount of energy that was used between the old and the new shoes. And what you actually see is there was 7.36% more energy used in the new shoes. Now, what do we definitively know from these results? Nothing. I'm a guy in a garage doing one test in a morning with an uncontrolled scenario. None of this is statistically, scientifically significant or really well designed, but that doesn't mean that we can't try to learn some things from it. Just see what some of the trends are. And we're gonna get to what the trend is that I think we can learn from this more than anything. First off, we see that old versus new shoes, the running dynamics with pace and cadence, actually, even when you've got shoes that I would say feel kind of flat versus shoes that still feel kind of springy, the actual performance really isn't that different. And if we go back to the VO2, what we actually see is that those shoes that are a little bit better broken in, a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more like a slipper, can actually reduce the amount of energy that you're using. I've got some theories about this. Number one, my first theory is that, well, maybe I got tired in the second test using the new shoes, but 7%, that's pretty significant. Even if it was 3-4%, I would have said, you know what, that is kind of getting on the edge of seeing that new shoes that still feel kind of snappy and firm, like these still have a fair bit of kind of tension to them, whereas these are fairly loose. Maybe that snap, that real fresh out of the box feeling isn't actually going to lead to good performance because maybe it's too stiff. Maybe it's not letting your body function naturally. So I think the one thing that we can learn a little bit from this is that as far as performance goes, maybe even once your shoes start to lose that snap, it's not like, oh, I'm not gonna have a good race on that, I better get rid of them. And that the real good barometer of when you should change your shoes is actually, when do your feet feel sore? When do your ankles feel sore? When do your joints feel sore? When are you starting to lose that cushion and actually feel a little bit beat up? That's what's more been told to me as the true indicator of when you should use your shoes. And what we see is that performance-wise, there probably is no indication that fresh out of the box shoes are going to be that much more fast than shoes that don't feel fresh out of the box. So that means you can save a little bit of money, probably use your older shoes for a little bit longer. Now the second thing, and I think the more interesting thing that this teaches us, is that when we originally tested the Atreyu shoes, we tested these against the Nike Vaporfly 4%. And the order that we did it in was actually Atreyu, then Vaporfly 4%. And what we saw was actually when we went to the Vaporfly 4%, even though you would expect based off what we just saw here today, that I'm a little bit more fatigued, that I'm using a little bit more energy because it's just the second test and maybe I'm building up just a little bit too much heart rate or fatigue or whatever it is, we actually saw that still the Vaporfly 4% used less energy even though I was more fatigued. So I think what this tells us more than anything is that the Vaporfly 4% are a legitimate shoe. That every indication that we've got between tests that have been done with Nike, independent tests that we see out there, tests that I've kind of done playing around with the VO2 Master Mask, that it just keeps confirming that these are legitimate shoes. So when people say, is it worth it? I think for wanting to rip a fast run in a race, yes, definitely worth it. Now, with all that said, if this interests you and you want to learn more about triathlon running, we actually just released our Triathlon Running Foundations book. I don't actually have any of the copies here because we can't get them shipped from the United States to here, but they're very similar to our Triathlon Swim Foundations book, our Triathlon Bike Foundations book. They're geared towards the newer athletes in triathlon that aren't sure about how to design their run training, aren't sure what gear to get, aren't sure really the order of things that they should focus on for the best results. You can go to triathlonrunningfoundations.com and right there you can get the PDF version, an audiobook version, or if you are into paperback versions, through triathlonrunningfoundations.com, you can get to the Amazon link for the paperback version. Reviews have been, yeah, like all the books, really good. So thanks to everyone who has bought them. Thanks to everyone who's made it this far into the video. And if you aren't already subscribed, hit the subscribe button below.
I was born in the dark.
Cheese. Cheese.